Hello everybody and welcome to our October webinar. Before we start, I'm going to say just a few words about the Free PGC. Free PGC is a voluntary organization and their aim is basically to spread the word worldwide about the free principles, and that happens in different formats like podcasts and those webinars. And they recently had, in September, a big conference, which I think was a very successful event. I couldn't attend, unfortunately, but I wish I could have. So before we start, I'd like to introduce our speaker today, Heath. She's been teaching the principles since 1980. And she was, basically, she was the person that set up the second center in the whole world that's basically only principle-based. And in total, she set up 4 other centers that work exclusively on the free principles. She has 2 clinical practices, one in Hawaii and one in Minnesota. And that's why the time changed today, because she's in Hawaii, so it would have been very early morning for her otherwise. And she basically works in all sorts of areas with all sorts of people, from jail, criminal justice, youth intervention, marriages, and individuals, mental health. As she told me, you name it, I worked in it at some point. So I told her I think she was a pioneer in terms of the principle. And at the moment, she trained other clinicians and students in the three principles. So now, Chris, it's all up to you.
Well, hello everybody. I'm really sorry about my technical difficulties. I'd like to say that's something new for me, but unfortunately it's not. I'm out here in the middle of the ocean, and my internet is also not very good. So I'm kind of disabled on many fronts here. So you'll excuse me. It's really great to be able to talk to some people. Usually what I try to do is kind of get information from people about what they'd like to hear about. So given that I'm talking to myself in the dark here and not sure who's on the call, I'm just going to start by talking a little bit about myself. And some of you probably have heard this before, and so you can do your knitting or something while I'm talking. But one of the things that I did was I started off my career as a mental health therapist, working mostly with women who had been physically or sexually abused. And I was doing, at that time, which was considered pretty mainstream therapy, which was more gestalt and experiential and kind of a little bit of this and a little bit of that, trying to do whatever I could to help people to deal with their trauma. And I was getting very disenchanted with my work because I really didn't see that people were happy. I was really kind of my idea in helping people was to help people to regain their happiness. And the more I worked with people, the more I realized that they got better, but they didn't really get a happy feeling to them. They were more like trying to cope with living life based on this trauma that they had. And at the time, this was in the 70s, there were very few people kind of working in this field at all. So there weren't very many people that I could look to see like what was helpful. But everybody that I did talk to, and I talked to many people at the time trying to do the best I could do, were having the same kind of results. So I was going to get out of the field, basically, because I was getting really burned out. And I didn't see that people were happy, and I wasn't happy. And I really wanted to be happy more than anything else. In fact, about a month before I went to my first training on the principles, I thought, I just really want to be happy. That's it. And I went to the training, and I had a really huge shift. Dr. Roger Mills came up to Minnesota, and he started talking about this new work. And at the time, he wasn't even talking about the principles. We hadn't even kind of refined it down to that. He was talking about how thought worked, and at least what I heard him talk about was I kind of tuned into the spiritual nature of what he was talking about, but it sounded to me more like AA. And of course, what I was doing was just kind of running it through my memory of everything that I'd ever learned about in terms of my therapy or helping people. What happened in the middle of it was that I just somehow started to listen. And there were a lot of reasons. The one that people get the cutest laugh about is that I went to the conference because I thought that it would be a better place to meet a husband than going to bars. I was always meeting alcoholics in bars. I didn't know why that was, but I wasn't having very good luck. So I thought, well, psychology conferences might be a good place to go. So I started listening because I thought I might get a dinner date with Roger. And so I thought I'd better, be able to converse with him in terms of what he was talking about. And, in those days, being positive in therapy was considered bad therapy. Focusing on the positive in itself that's a whole shift in the field of psychology, is focusing on positive psychology. And at this time, it was considered bad work. So I started listening, and he was talking about, the positive, and I thought, oh, positive, I could focus on the positive. I could do that. And then something shifted in me during the break, and I asked a doctor about it, and he said, well, I think it's kind of good common sense. And I thought, if a doctor thinks this is common sense, because I didn't want to get involved in anything that was real trippy or weird, or I was a Midwestern girl, very conservative, and all of a sudden I had this shift where I recognized that life was created from the inside out. And it was like one of those moments where you look at an optical illusion and you see it one way, and then click, you see something totally different. And then I clicked back and realized how I'd gotten so far off base and why I wasn't happy, because I was trying to fix my own problems after I created them, and that's what I was doing with clients, so they kept repeating the same problems. So that was over a weekend. I came back to my clients on Monday, and I had changed so much that I couldn't do what I had done before. I just couldn't see to do it that way anymore. And so I said, look, you guys, I've always done what I thought was the most progressive and the most helpful to you to change. And I've learned something this weekend, and I just can't do therapy the way I used to do it anymore. And at the time, I had 65 clients, 65 women, all of them traumatized in one way or another. Some of them severely traumatized for years and years and years. And they all basically said the same thing when I started talking about what I'd learned. And they said, oh, this is what's been missing. This makes sense. And it's interesting because I just got a call from one of those women about a week after the conference that we did in Minnesota. And it was a very strange week because she called on a Saturday, and she said, I don't know if you remember me or not, but my name is blah, blah, blah. And as she talked, I recognized her voice, and I could remember her face. And she was calling me to let me know that she thought of me often and was so grateful for what she had learned because it saved her life. She talked about the rest of the family and how poorly they were doing, and how she was able to get through things like a genetic form of blindness that came on her early. And although it was hard, she was able to get through it. And it was so great to talk with her because she reminded me of some things. She said, oh, did you remember that you did hypnosis on me? And I was like, seriously? Because I've never been trained in hypnosis, so I have no idea what the heck I was doing. But yeah, she said, yeah, me and this other guy that was a therapist, we met with her and we did hypnosis, but I'm pretty sure he must have done it because I've never, ever been trained in that. So that's kind of where I was at that time. It was like the Wild West, kind of doing whatever I could do. But she said she remembers that when I changed, there was something that she knew was different, and that I was different, and that's what she wanted to follow. So she said she remembers me taking her hand and telling her that it was not her fault. She said, now you'd said that to me many times before, but something was different this time that I could hear it. And that was like one of the most wonderful things. I can't tell you that after 30 years, 35 years, I think it was, somebody comes back to you and tells you that. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like if that's the only person I helped. Sorry, I get the feeling wells up in me when I start to talk about this sometimes, and I get tearful. So I'm not sad. I'm just kind of get filled up with gratitude that, if one person doesn't suffer anymore, that's kind of what is. That's 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 it for me. And that's the thing. It's like she's one person, but it's kind of like over the years there are hundreds of people that I've worked with, and that other people have worked with that have been touched by these principles. And it's kind of like the goodness of it, the power of it, just keeps coming, keeps coming. So just to kind of go back to the week after the conference, then about 5 days later, I got a call from a therapist that worked with me that same time. And actually, she was responsible for me being able to go down to Florida, which was the only place you could learn about this work at the time, and get a deeper grounding. So she'd see my clients, I'd go down there and come back, and we both changed. So we both kind of were the blind leading the blind. But I came back after my conference, after the conference with her, and I told her, I said, look, they found the cure to mental illness. And I thought I could tell everybody that. I could go to everybody and say, look, this is the cure to mental illness. And I did. I went to everybody that I knew, and everybody looked at me like I was crazy, and half of them had been to the same conference as I. So in recognizing this, I also recognize that not everybody's going to hear it or see it at the same time. So it was interesting when she called, because I tried to reach her. I tried to find her. We got kind of separated as time went on, and things were changing so much in the very beginning because we were really pioneers and kind of going forward and learning how to teach the principles at the same time we were learning it for ourselves. So it was very interesting to hear her rendition of how things were. She said, it was a lot of change. It was a lot of change, Chris. And I said, yeah, it was a lot of change. And it was good change, though. And when you're not used to a lot of change, sometimes it gets a little bit unnerving. And that's, I think, one of the things that happens when you learn the principles is that at first when you change, you have a shift. It's like everything in your life changes. How you work with clients change, how you talk to your family changes. It's like, Sid would say is that when you have a change in your level of consciousness, you change across the board. So you can't really do what you used to do if you have a deep enough shift in understanding. And to me, the thing at the time, and as I have been doing this work, I think I've gone towards it and away from it so many times that I have a deeper appreciation for what happened at that time. It's kind of like when you see something different, you don't really need courage to go on. But in looking back, I think, man, that was pretty good. That, I was like 30 years old, and there was 2 of us really in the whole city of Minneapolis, St. Paul area. There's probably 10 people in the world doing this work. And yet I saw it so deep, I knew I couldn't turn around. I knew that I had to do whatever I needed to do to keep bringing this forth in the world, and I knew that would be my life's work. So in the beginning, when you're first kind of waking up to the principles, you walk in and you start talking to people, and you just talk from a beautiful feeling. And you talk about the possibilities, and you talk about whatever comes out of your mouth. And one of the things that my teacher told me is, he said, Chris, when you go do a session, go in there and listen to yourself, because you'll learn a lot. And at the time I thought, wow, that's really wise, because what's coming through me is wisdom. And I'll learn from that too. So all I have to do kind of is get out of the way and talk as high as I can. And that's what we did. We just kind of, shot from the hip and did whatever came to mind. And then I think what happens is, the topic of my talk is how to evolve. And so I'm kind of doing this in a way that we talk about how we evolve. And once you start talking about the principles, it's really easy to think that you know what they are. To think, I know the three principles. They are, mind is blah, 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 consciousness is blah, blah, blah. And right before Sid Banks died, I remember he called me up and we were having a heart-to-heart conversation. And he said, Chris, you don't know the principle. I said, okay, I don't know the principles. Do you want me to stop teaching this? He goes, no, but don't forget that. And that's, I think, what keeps your feeling fresh and alive, is that you remember that whatever it is you think you know, that's not it. That there's always something deeper. And this is the only work in mental health field that's like that, that's ever evolving. It's ever changing. So the more you change in yourself, the more your work changes. And you can tell when you get kind of caught up in your intellect, and it will happen. It happens to everybody that I know anyway. You start thinking that you know something, or you start saying the same thing, or you start trying to make a point with people, and you start losing the feeling. And then all of a sudden, clients start arguing with you, or you start losing people, or you start having problems in your life. And that's really a time, if you can listen for that, a time to kind of wake up and go back to that place of not knowing. Because every time you go to that place of not knowing, you get to wake up again, just like the first time. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I didn't see this before. Like, I don't know if any of you have read the books that Sid Banks writes, but his books are these books that are so unbelievably alive that you can read them once and they're like, it's an okay story. And then you read it again, it's like, oh, I get what he's trying to say. And then you read it again and you just get hit with a feeling. And every time you change in your level of consciousness, that book is different. His tapes are different. Your clients are different. Your family is different. You're different. And that is the most wonderful thing in the world, because you can't get burned out from your work. You just can't if you stay in that feeling. If you get out of the feeling, then you get to be impacted by stress just like everybody else. And believe me, there are things that'll happen. It's like there are people that we can't reach. I always tell people that, if I could make people happy, I'd be really rich and I'd be retired and there'd be no wars and the world would be a different place, because I just fix everybody. But I can't do that, and nobody can. None of us can do that. But what we can do is just live a really beautiful life ourselves. Be able to have a life where you're rested and you're quiet in your mind. And like, I don't know about you, but it's easy to get thinking again. It's easy to get going. And when I do that, it's almost like a blessing, because when I see it, then I get to go deeper again. I get to find a deeper feeling. And that feeling that you are in, that's the thing that does it. It's like you touch someone at whatever level you're at, and you can't really talk to somebody about living in a state of consciousness that's higher than you can see. You can't You can't talk about it because you don't know it. So when people try to talk about, like sometimes, I think we all kind of tried to be like Sid, and we'd try to, I know I'd listened to the tapes so much when I first learned this that I started to talk with an A in my voice. And you can't really talk about what you don't know. You just have to talk about what you know. And if what you know is more than the client knows, you're in good shape. That's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about it. So the only thing you want to do as a therapist is to be open to continue seeing things different and to recognize that what it is that you see at any point in time is just what you're seeing at this point. When you change, you'll see it differently. So what's interesting is, as we've evolved in this work, we've kind of gone from we used to say, when you're hot, and when you're not, you're not. And we went from there to creating these concepts and ideas and creating a psychology, which totally lost the feeling. And now I think I'm getting back to really just talking from that feeling again and seeing what comes out and listening to myself and getting right back to letting the wisdom come through and not caring so much about how it comes through. Because it's really only in that feeling. That feeling is what has kept this going throughout and gone around the world at this point. It's not any one of us. We would have lost it a long time ago. But it's just knowing that the feeling will take care of everything. You just have to get back to it. If you lose your grounding, you get back to it. And then you take a look at that and say, okay, there's something I'm not seeing that I got, my grounding got off here. I want to see what that is. One time I was down in Coral Gables, Florida, and there was about 6 of us down there meeting with Sid, and we went to a little park, and there was a big monkey pod tree, big banyan tree, I guess. And the banyan tree was, providing the shade, and so we kind of all sat down in a group, and Sid was talking to us, and I don't remember a lot about what he said, but what I do remember is that he said, if there's a problem in your life after you've learned the principles, that was a problem before you learned it, clean it up. Clean up your life. Get rid of it. Get rid of that insecurity, because that's just getting in your way, and you want to see whatever it is you don't see to get rid of that. And I remember thinking to myself, I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I don't know if everybody else thought that too, because of course we didn't share that, but I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I remembered that because, it's like we're just like anybody else. It's like you get insecure, and whatever your old thinking is comes to life again. And it maybe comes to life in a different way. It maybe is not as stressful. It's not as real. It's not as negative. But it's still lurking in the back. And it's always kind of taking yourself on to, like for me, it was just like I wanted to get rid of insecurity. Now, I got rid of a lot of insecurity because I was pretty crazy. I mean, I was very, very stressed. And, I was extremely negative. And it's just recognizing that there's not a judgment to that. I think that's what we kind of judge ourselves until we get afraid of that. And we want to look at it, say, if we can see something about ourselves and let go of it, let go of that insecurity, we get a better life. So it's a totally selfish thing. Now, what happens is, of course, you're much better with your clients and you're much better with the world, but you feel better, and that's kind of the portion. Am I on now?
Yes. Yes, you are. Yes, you are, Heath. Can you see me?
Here I am.
So we can carry on with the video. Hold on your...
Yeah. Oh, all right. It looks like... What?
No, it's okay.
Okay. All right. It looks like I've got raccoon eyes, though. I think I was better when I didn't have to look at myself. Isn't it funny how insecurity goes? Like, here it is. I look at myself and then I get really insecure, like, oh my God, I got black eyes, I look terrible. And of course, that's one of my things, right, is how I look, which is interesting because when I was young, I always worried about whether I was too fat, and now I worry about whether I'm too old. So there you go. It doesn't ever change. But because I understand that, I'm not like I would have looked at myself before and gone, oh my God. Okay, so should we, can we go to questions? Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask me?
So just to remind some people and the ones that don't know, if you want to ask questions, there is two ways you can do that. The first one, there is a little icon at the bottom right corner of your screen with a little hand in there. So if you click on that, you will raise your hand and you know you want to ask a question, and I can unmute you. The other way is to send me a chat. And again, I will unmute you and you can ask a question. So I hope that's clear. So anybody has questions, go for it. We have one. We have Toby that would like to ask a question. So I'm going to unmute her.
Okay.
Okay, Toby.
Thanks. Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Hi. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you at the conference.
I remember your name. Keep talking.
Okay. At the conference in London, at the Chicken Conference.
Okay.
Okay. So I was just so moved by what you said before. It's really not a question, it's more a comment. I just want to say that I was so moved. You got me crying. I'm very much like you. I get so overwhelmed, and people around me don't like it, but I'm fine with it. It's not, as you said, I'm not sad. I'm just, I get very overwhelmed, in a nice way, in a really nice way. But when you spoke about that, it's okay when we do get into our thinking, because then when we come out of it, we really learn something, and then we can go deeper. And that really resonated with me. So I just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Yeah, it was funny because in my insecurity, I've always been very critical of myself. And so after I would do a conference or a talk or something, I never look at the evaluations. Because if I look at the evaluations, one of the things that I would do is I would focus on what didn't go well, like what's wrong, and look at it that way. And I figured seeing as it's over and done with, there's not much I could do about it anyway. So what's the big deal? Why look at it? And then I was doing some teaching with another woman, and she was like, couldn't wait to get the evaluation. And she goes, let's look at them right away. And I said, seriously? Why would you want to look at those? And she said, oh, because I want to see what it is that people are hearing so I can do it better. And I was like, I could see that she had no personal thinking about how she did. She had absolutely none. She could care less how she did, and all she wanted to do was do a better job at presenting. And all of a sudden, I could see myself in my big ego, like totally into worrying about how I was going to do it and all that kind of insecurity that we still hang on to. And that's the most beautiful thing, I think, is to remember that whatever you're doing is okay. It's like we're all so far away from being enlightened that we have so far to go, it doesn't matter. So the more you are open to making mistakes and not being personal about teaching the principles. It's like when we get personal about it, two things can happen. One is that we get really insecure, and we worry, and we try to control what we're saying, and then we lose the feeling. And then the other thing that can happen is we make it be about me. So when you can tell when people make it be about themselves, they lose the feeling big time. And it's really a disservice to others to think that you as a person are a leader or you don't want to have followers. You want to have like little groupies that are following you. You want really people to see that the wisdom and what changes them is within that person. And I'll give you a really good example. I had 2 new clients here in Hawaii. I'm just kind of opening another office in Waimea. And somehow, I haven't advertised it, I haven't talked to Soul about it, but somehow people, you know, it's kind of like if you build it, they will come. And I got 2 calls from 2 women. One woman had a history of being diagnosed with bipolar, and the other woman was alcoholic. And I had 2 of the best sessions that I thought I'd done in a long time. I mean, I felt like I was really present and in a really beautiful feeling, and they were really touched by that session, both of them. And they were just like, oh, I think I found the answer, blah, blah, blah. So the next week comes, and I've got them scheduled, and the woman who's bipolar doesn't show up. So I called her. I was concerned. And I said, well, what's going on? She goes, well, I've made an appointment with a different therapist, and I'm going to try somebody else first. I might come back to you, but I'm going to try somebody else first. And I had to laugh because I thought, there you go. You know, it's like all you can do is do the best you can do, and then whatever happens from that point on will be right. And what I told her was, look, I just want you to do what feels right for you. And she said, oh, thank you very much. I said, oh, no problem. It's, you know, if you want to come back, you come back. You want to go to see somebody else, that's fine. The other woman comes in, and she's like happier than a lark. She goes, I felt so good for days, and I haven't been drinking, and I haven't even wanted to be drinking. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that I met you. So there you go. So if you take responsibility for people that do well and get something from you, then you got to take responsibility for the ones that don't. And my feeling is, it's like all you can do is do the best you can and really listen to your wisdom, and then you got to let the chips fall where they may, because you can't control any of that. And you never know. You know, you never know when people are going to show up again. You just plant the seeds. That was a long answer to your question or your comment, so I hope that was helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Love that. Absolutely. So much wisdom in that. So much truth. Thank you so much.
Got to turn this up a little bit.
We have another question from Helen. Chris. So I'll unmute her.
Hi, Helen.
It's okay, Helen. You should be muted now.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
I can hear you, Helen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It's very funny. I just sent a question and then you really partially answered it. It was really about the insecurity around what people hear, I guess, or when or how. I'm just beginning to see, I think you said in another talk about it not really sort of being any of a business about what people hear and when, but also when we're going out into our work, of what changes within that. Like, you start a group and then something changes within that.
I can't. There, now I can hear you better. I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I couldn't hear you.
I'd just love to hear you speak a little bit about when you're beginning the work and you're planting those seeds, about also not having too much regard to where that goes.
Can you restate that, Catherine? I couldn't quite. It would break up when she was talking.
It was breaking up a bit for me too, so I didn't get everything either. Helen, do you mind to try again? Do you have a microphone? If you can get a bit closer, maybe.
Oh, sure. It is on the microphone, but
There,
I can just message it through if you like. It was just to hear a little bit more from you about also, you talked of planting the seeds and not being concerned about sort of where that goes or when that's heard. But also as practitioners perhaps in starting out in community or in different sectors of sort of how that unfolds.
I still couldn't really hear you.
Okay, don't worry. I will message it through. It doesn't matter. I'll
Okay.
enjoy
Yeah.
I'll enjoy listening to you.
Okay. What I'm not sure. What this is what came to my mind when you were talking. I have no idea if this answers your question, but when you really are listening to your wisdom and you're talking from that feeling, you don't have to worry about whether it's the right thing to say or the wrong thing to say. You just talk. And just like you said, when I was talking, I was answering your question before you asked it. It's like somehow the wisdom comes through you and it'll fit for somebody. So even if you're just getting it for yourself, that's a wonderful thing. And, having an insight as you are talking to somebody else is a really powerful thing. Like I remember my teacher would be talking to me and he'd go, oh my gosh, I just got that myself. And I was like, oh wow, he's learning as I'm learning. Isn't that cool? So, it's like when you know that the wisdom that comes through you is not like Chris Heath. It's not me doing it, in a sense. It's what's coming through me. And all I have to do is listen and share the feeling that comes with it. And that's the best we can do. So it's in a sense, you're like a mirror, and you're reflecting what's in the person. And if they see that and they can like wake up to it, then it's theirs. And that's what you want to do. You want them to see that it's not you doing it to them. It's them awakening on their own. Like when I first learned this at the conference that I went to, there was, I would say there was 30, maybe 40 people at the conference. I was the only one that got it. Now, he said the same thing to everybody. He had the same feeling, and yet nobody else got it. In fact, I worked with like 7 or 8 of them, and they all came back, and they saw me as so different, and they couldn't understand it. Because they were at the same place listening to the same thing, but I changed, and I changed so dramatically that they couldn't deny it. But they couldn't go there. In fact, one of my partners at the time said that he was trying to figure out all week what had happened to me that didn't happen to him. And he was trying to figure it out. And he said, on Saturday, I just said, oh, forget it. Who cares? And he said, I got up Sunday morning, and I got it. And he said, and then I thought, if I do this kind of work, I'm going to need a lot more referrals because people will get better faster. And I don't think I want to do that. And I was like dumbfounded because I thought, seriously? You can see that this would help people better and faster and you're worried about referrals? But, that's just where he was at. I moved back to Minnesota and I had lunch with him and he was just not there. Not there at all. It's very interesting.
We have another question, Christine, from Radomir, so I'm going to unmute him and be able to ask.
Okay.
I'll pass you on if you want.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to say thank you to all of you guys who are participating in this event. It's this wonderful experience just to be listening. And I would like, just for people who maybe never experienced this emanation of the energy when you're with a client, and what happens when both people, one who is talking and one who is listening, is benefiting from what is being said. Maybe those people would like to hear the difference between sharing and teaching, because what I'm hearing very often is teaching and learning, and I would like to hear something about sharing and connecting and this energy emanating. So I would like to hear your opinion on those things about teaching and learning as opposed to sharing and connecting, if you don't mind, please.
Well, I think what happens is that we we get a little bit, we get caught up in the words, okay? We get caught up in the words, and we just love to make a form out of this, you know, is what I can tell you, is that we just love to make a form. The first form we created was called Psychology of Mind, and we called POM, 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 POM. And then we thought, oh, it sounds like Science of Mind, so let's change it. So then we went to various things, but we started, I guess Roger came up with Health Realization. We gave it a name, we gave it a form. And I think that connecting with people from a beautiful feeling is the most important thing that you can do. If you don't do that, it doesn't matter what you say. You can, well, I shouldn't say that, because honestly, there's times when I've been really intellectual with people and they've gotten a lot out of it. Not me so much, but they've gotten, for some reason, I've pointed them in the right direction. So it's really, the power in this work is in the feeling. Love is the most powerful thing in the world. And that is what brings us all to health. Now, when we're talking about it, we frequently get caught up in the words, and we forget that it's in the feeling. I'll give you an example. There was a guy from, I heard a story about a social worker who had come to the conference, and he's been around the principles for a long time, and he'd gotten a job where he really wasn't his job to really share the principles. And he had gotten away from that feeling, and so he kind of woke up to that and contacted some people and said, you know, something's not right here. I'm not in a good place or something. So he came to the conference, and before he came to the conference, he'd been trying to get the prison to let him come in and do a group on the principles in the prison. And his supervisor would not let him do it. No, 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 no. So he comes to the conference, and he goes back to work, and he tries again, and the supervisor says, sure, how can we help you? And only one guy signed up, and his supervisor said, that's okay. You just start with one guy and more will come. And he said, I don't know what it was that was different, but it's really a great example, isn't it? When we change on the inside, when we drop into a deeper state of consciousness and we're living in a more beautiful feeling, that feeling opens the doors for us. That feeling is like shines the light on the path so that we can see where to go to help somebody. Like sometimes without the feeling, you can say something very profound and it'll do nothing, it'll go nowhere. You know, it's just like those little sayings you get, you know, on Facebook, people pass around all these sayings that people say, that people have, and they're very nice, but they don't really change somebody. And when you're in that feeling and you're really listening, and by listening, I mean your mind is not thinking about what you're saying or what the person needs to hear. That you're just talking and connecting and being present in the moment. You're really listening. That I always tell people, listening like you listen to the wind go through the trees. When you're there, you can talk about something really intellectual, and it can hit somebody. So you're right. I mean, I think you're right. And my opinion is that the more we talk about sharing that feeling and living in that feeling and coming from that feeling, the more powerful it is. And that means you got to keep things really simple. You know, it's like we like to start writing about things, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but, you know, it's like you can once we engage our intellect, we start thinking we're smart and we start thinking we know something. And then, of course, we start thinking about ourselves. So there comes the insecurity again. Whereas if you're just there to share love, to feel love, to help the person wake up to the love that's in them, then whatever they need to see and hear, it'll come from them. Your work is done with that. I'll give you an example of that. I work at a school on this island, and I was talking to a young woman, and she has been having all kinds of anxiety. It's a boarding school, so she would be at school and she'd be fine, then she'd go to her home and on the weekend and be stressed. And so I asked her, is there something going on at home? I mean, what's going on? And she said, oh, no, I have a wonderful family. I really love my family. They really love me. It's really good. And so I said, well, I got to get this paperwork done for the insurance company. So let me just ask her some questions. And I started asking her about her grandparents for some reason. And so she told me about a situation that was happening with her grandmother. And she looked at me, she goes, oh, I guess there is stress at home. I forgot about that. I said, oh, okay, great. And she said, and then this other thing came in my mind, is that I remember I saw this movie about a person that had premonitions and then they got upset about it and people died. And she said, I think I made that personal. I said, oh, okay, great. So whatever it is she saw, that came from, I had no idea that any of that was even happening. But I just kind of stayed in a good place and was doing what I needed to do. And out of that came her own insight. So we'll see how she is this week. Maybe she doesn't even need to come in anymore. She might be totally shifted. And she might not be. I don't know. And that's the other piece, is that you just never know. Like, I remember as a young therapist, I was kind of taught, like, you should, like, strategize what you're going to do in the session. And I remember thinking, like, if what I did in the session helped, wouldn't they be different by the next week? How would I know what to do? And so I could never do that. And then when I learned the principles, I went, duh, yeah, that's it. If a person changes, you have to really be present, because you got to keep up with that person. You have to stay in a place that you can see where they're at today. The other thing I was going to talk a little bit about is that one of the things I think you have to be a little bit careful of when you're talking about the principles or you're sharing whatever it is. It's like you have to learn to recognize, to look at people as they are, not as you want them to be. Frequently what happens is I see with people that I train that they'll get positive thinking about their client rather than really listening to where the person is at in that moment. And so learning to recognize levels of consciousness at the same time that you see health in a person takes a little bit of, takes a lot of being present, I guess, because you want to remember that you're looking for how their level is changing and how their life falls into place as a result of that, not the words they're reflecting back to you and telling you about. You can always tell with people because they'll be coming from, they'll come in and say, oh, this changed, or, oh, this happened and I didn't get upset about it. They'll be able to talk about their life in a way that's different. That's how you know they're changing. It's like, to me, it's like I just remember what happened when I change. How does life look to me? And then I know that that's what I'm also going to be looking for in the people that I'm talking to. If they talk like that, I know that they're good. They're good to go. If they don't talk like that, then I know I've got to go deeper. I've got to go deeper. I've got to get quieter with them. I've got to listen deeper. Because the more listening I do, the more I can see what it is that's getting in their way. Or the more they can see it, actually. It's what really happens. It doesn't matter if I see it. I don't know if how that came across, but does that make sense to people?
Perfect sense.
Do you want to add anything, Ralph?
No, that just makes perfect sense. What more can you say?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good question, though. Thanks for asking that question, because I think that's, you know, one of the things that we all do. We all have done it. I don't judge anybody for it, but you know, it's like just don't make it be about yourself, and don't care about what you know, because that's not it. And it keeps you fresh and keeps it all fresh and new. It's like, you know, I've been talking about the principle. I was thinking the other day, how many minutes of my life do I spend talking about the principles, or talking about mental health, talking about feeling better? And a lot, let's put it that way, just a lot of minutes of my life. And it's like the more you talk about it, the more you can get out of the feeling, because you like are doing the same thing. So you've got to stay present in the moment. You got to stay fresh, and you want to be listening to the person, not to yourself so much. I mean, you want to listen to yourself, but you want to be connecting with that person. So what comes through you is like that. It's like you're the conduit. That's, you know, kind of how I see myself, as I'm just a conduit. I'm just sitting here, and if I can clean up my own insecurity, what comes through me is cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, and then it's other people can see it better, so they can wake up to it.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else questions? We don't have anybody now, but maybe someone wants to ask a question. Just raise your hand or send me a chat and I'll mute you.
What did you say?
I just asked if anybody else wanted to ask questions. It's all very quiet. I guess no.
Martha.
Martha, you can ask your question if you want. Okay. Martha, can you hear? She's talking back on here. Okay, I'm going to read because she doesn't have a microphone, so she can't speak.
Okay.
So, but
all right.
She said earlier, she sent the chat earlier saying, I am about to do my first public presentation, and I am so pleased to hear you speak to the vast array of emotion we can feel when presenting or chatting, and that just pausing and going back to the feeling is the key. At the conference in Minnesota, I chuckled because when the presenters would pause, it was like they were listening to a new piece from Inner Wisdom, the guy in the big control book.
I missed the middle of that. Can you read it one more time?
Oh yeah, I can, sure. So I'll read from the beginning again.
Okay.
So she said, I am about to do my first public presentation, and I am so pleased to hear you speak to the vast array of emotions you can feel when presenting or chatting, and that just pausing and going back to the feeling is the key. At the conference in Minnesota, I chuckled because when the presenters would pause, it was like they were listening to a new piece from Inner Wisdom, the guy in the big control book.
That's right. You know, just go and have a good time. That's like, for me, I don't know about you guys, but I was a queen of seriousness. So I remember Dr. Mills, I'd call him up and I'd go, Roger, da 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 da. And he'd go, Chris, it's not important. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. It's over and done with already. Forget it. And I would get so frustrated with him, but he was right. You know, it's like, you just want to have fun. Just go and have fun in your presentation, have a great time, and don't even think about how you're doing. You know, you're there. You know, one of the things that helps me when I do a presentation is that I'm giving back. I'm just sharing what I got. And so I don't feel like I need to perform, or I need to, you know, like achieve anything or do anything. I'm just there to share what I have and hope that somebody else gets something from it. And if they don't, oh well. But it's really, the key is having a good time. Because you have a good time with your audience, it doesn't matter what you say, they'll think you're wonderful. They'll get a good feeling. my teacher told me one more thing. He said, when you share something with somebody, you give them a little bit. He said, and if they take it, you give them a little bit more. And if they take that, you give them a little bit more. And if they start to choke, you tell a joke and leave them laughing. So good luck. You'll do great.
Yeah, Michael Loring would like to ask a question. So I open the mic for him. Michael, you're on if you want.
Yeah, hi there. Yeah, I'm sitting in for my wife today. I guess you got the messages. I facilitate a group and of people in early recovery, and it's actually at a detox. And these are all people who've been in recovery for relatively short periods of time, although many of them do come through to get off methadone and to eliminate that from their lives. Monday, something happened that I thought was kind of neat. I had 4 women and 2 men had shown up. Typically, we have small groups of 6 to 8. And what happened was, at the end of it all, the men had hardly said anything, and I asked, I said, was there anything you wanted to say? If there's something, they'd said a few things here and there, but they said, no, we were just listening. And what they'd been doing is 2 of the women had been speaking from their wisdom, and they were listening. And it was like, I just realized today that I think there's a connection between your wisdom and someone else. If your innate health responds to when you hear wisdom. And I just wondering what your experiences with that were.
Well, that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is an intelligence that belongs to everybody. So when you're talking from wisdom, I mean, that's the thing about groups that I love, is because if you don't have any wisdom coming through you, somebody else will. And it doesn't, like, wisdom doesn't belong to anybody, and it's not personal. It's impersonal, and it's good for, in fact, there's a slogan in 12-step programs, it's good for one, good for all. And that's what wisdom is. It's good for one, good for all. So when you're talking from your wisdom, it's like it can come through anybody. It can come through any one of us at any time. That's a beautiful story, because that's really what a group is about, is that we share, people talk from their wisdom, and it touches somebody else. And frequently, I remember when one of my groups, when I was first learning this, one of my clients went beyond me. She came into group one day, and she was in the most unbelievable feeling I had ever been around in anybody really. She was like, the good feeling was like dripping off of her. And she came into group, and she started talking, and she said she was in recovery, and she said that on the way to work she had bought some flowers. She said, I just wanted to have some flowers on my desk and have it be nice and beautiful. And she said, another guy from the program came through, and he said, oh, where'd you get the flowers from? And she said, oh, I bought it for myself. And he goes, oh, that's such a healthy thing to do. And she said, I really wasn't thinking about whether it was healthy or not. I just wanted to have something nice in my office. And when she was talking, she was like in such a beautiful feeling. I thought, okay, Chris, just shut up and listen. Because right now, this person is in a way better feeling than you are. And you'd better listen, because she's got something to say. And it was one of the best teaching moments in my life, because this person just went right beyond me in that moment. So, yeah, it's like that's the beautiful thing about wisdom, is that it doesn't belong to anybody, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can have somebody. In fact, that's kind of what a spiritual awakening is, isn't it? When somebody's recovering from an addiction, or they're maybe not recovering yet, they're like waking up to their addiction, and they have what's called a spiritual awakening. That's really when they drop into a deep state of consciousness. And frequently that's when they're like coming down off of some high, or they're in the middle of a high or something. It's like your wisdom. It's like you don't have to like be meditating by the ocean with a quiet mind to get wisdom. Wisdom is always there. It's always there. It's just that when we have a really busy mind, we can't hear it because we're not paying attention to it. And everybody has it, because that's the oneness of life, isn't it? It's like we all come from the same energy. We all come from love. We all come from, that's why they say God is love. We all come from whatever you want to call that, but that is the intelligence of all things. So it has to be, everybody has to have it. That's a great thing to see, though, because that, when you got that going in your group, there's something happening there. So good for you.
You have one more question, please, and I'm going to read it. That's okay.
Yep.
So the question is from Wim, and it said, when I get that warm feeling while listening, there is often also a feeling of tension as well. I think he wants to know more about that.
No, you just, you know, we're really attached to our insecure thinking. And so when we start to change, this is just how I explain it. So you listen and see if this fits, I don't know. But to me, it was like my insecure thinking, I designed that to protect myself based on how life looked to me. Okay, so when I started to when I started feeling better, it was like my thinking was trying to get a foothold back. It was like trying to get me back into that insecure place because I thought I was in danger. Okay, like that was just my thinking. So like the week after I changed, every day I felt like I got tested. Every day something happened that I normally would get really freaked out about, and I knew that what was happening was that I was learning how to stay in a good feeling no matter what happened outside of me. And I remember that I used to have nightmares, and I woke up that week with the worst nightmare I'd had in 10 years. And, you know, I was sweating, and I was crying, and I was clutching the covers, and I was sitting up in bed when I woke up. And I went, oh, no, it's come back. My insecurity's back. And then my wisdom came in and said, it's a trick of your mind. Dreams are just thoughts. Let it go. And I started laughing. I said, that's right. It's trying to trick me back, and I'm not going back. So what I think about it is I just think about my old thinking is frequently trying to trick me back into the way that I programmed it, because I've been thinking that way for so many years, and I analyzed it, and I like, you know, put the cement in so that it was like so rock solid that I just got tested with that to see if, really I think what it is an opportunity to let it go. I was helping myself to see what I needed to continue to let go of. And so that's kind of, I think, what happens is you get into a beautiful feeling and then you start to think about it. It's like, oh my God, how do I keep this? What do I do? What's going to happen? And so you just like let it go and go back to that feeling and just notice that you're just moving into a different state of mind. You're moving into a different level of consciousness. And you got to let the other one go. You know, it's like, just don't bother me. It's just a thought. It's nothing more. It's just a thought. I mean, that was, to be honest with, that was my mantra for a long time. This is just a thought. Your mind is tricking you. It's not real. You'll be okay. And sometimes I do. In fact, I just went, I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Gravity, but I just went to that this weekend. Oh my God, it's a wonderful movie. And I was terrified through most of it. I was so anxious watching it. It was so real to me that I had to put my head in my husband's shoulder because I was like so insecure with it. And then my husband, we're both watching the same movie with our 3D glasses on. And my husband's sitting there eating his popcorn, not the least bit fazed by anything that he's seeing. So we all have our own thing, you know. It's like our own insecurities, our own thinking. We're creating it all, but that's all it is. Just remember, it's all it is. Just let it go and forget about it. Does that help?
You say it makes so much sense. Thank you. So
great.
You say yes, that helps.
Great, wonderful.
we don't have any more questions, Heath, so.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for listening. It was, again, really quite an honor for me to be able to do this and to have people listening. So I'm sorry that my camera was a little slow in reacting, but I'm very grateful to have been able to share this with you. And if you have any questions, anybody you want to ask me any questions later on, you can always email me. You can get a hold of me through the 3PGC. I'm a practitioner, so I'd be willing to help anybody. So aloha. Yeah, aloha.
Thank you so much. It was a great webinar.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you.
And goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.